And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. After becoming a major success after almost 20 years after its founding by the brothers Roy and Walter, the Disney Brothers studio diversified into live-action films. In a quote often attributed to Walt, "If you can dream it, you can do it." On today's Open Connection, we discover how a random meeting launched Métis Nation member Curtis Pilon Vinish's career.
So I'm from the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. I don't have a technical clan, but my spirit name is Pictou is my spirit name. I was born and raised in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan and Treaty 6 territory. I was raised by my mom and then my older sister in a single parent home. My mom was born in Waka, Saskatchewan, but we were the first to move into the city and grow up fully in the city. For me, like this, I think part of it is that the city was normalized to us. So we were completely disconnected from the community, from a lot of cultural aspects. We kind of just fully ingrained within colonial Canadian society.
What did you decide to take as a major when you were in college?
Yeah, so once I was finished high school, I actually did music. I did 2 years of music and really tried to do in singing and dancing, and didn't realize that I didn't really get big paychecks. So I had to switch things up. And so when I went to look at what to do, I wanted to work with young people. And so that kind of led me down to apply for the Saskatchewan Urban Native Teachers Education Program, which is an education program at the University of Saskatchewan. So my sister, who's way older than me, and see this one thing, hopefully might not make it out, but she actually was the first in my immediate family to get a secondary degree. And so a lot of it followed her the path that she laid. But then I also have cousins, a second cousin that went through the program. So it's a program specifically for Métis individuals. It's operated through Gabriel Dumont Institute and in partnership with the University of Saskatchewan. But it's actually what you're saying. There's elder access. A lot of the professors and teachers, your administrators are Indigenous. So it's really gives a safer space within those colonial institutions. I honestly don't believe I would have made it in a regular program, just through the challenges that I went through when I was in school. But having that, not just sympathy, but understanding of lived experience that our administrators had, that actually would vouch for us, and for me particularly, for things like attendance or, why isn't this in, or late assignments. There was instead of just in most cases where people will just assume and there's no what ifs or anything, we would have people that be like, well, what's going on? And then when they hear, tell us, but you get so used to not having that support or understanding, and it's almost like a shame within schools of you leave that aside, all that other stuff out there, and you're just here to work kind of deal. So that's what I really appreciate about that program.
Did you immediately find a job and jumped right into that?
Yeah, so I was really blessed to be hired right away in Saskatoon, and I was hired to develop a Nahuatl language and land-based program. So I taught grade 9, and it was pretty wild for 3 years, but I really enjoyed those 3 years and the lessons learned and just the whole experience of it. It was very stressful, but I definitely learned a lot.
Is that when you started your company, or is that when you started to get into the industry?
I was teaching math, and I got a phone call from Los Angeles while I was doing that, and I was like, well, that looks weird, obvious why I'm called. And then I answered the phone, and there was a lady that I had met 2 years previous on a road trip with some friends to New Mexico, and it was my friend's mom. And she's like, oh, you should sing for her. So I sang for her. And never thought anything of it. And then 2 years later, she called me and was like, hey, I have a role in a movie for you. We need a singer. Can you do an audition? And I was like, okay, cool. I wasn't really thinking anything too crazy. Just especially within that time frame, there wasn't really a lot of big Indigenous films or big Indigenous, representation, and films like that weren't unheard of. So I didn't even know, and wasn't really thinking very like, oh wow, this is gonna be crazy. So yeah, I did the audition and ended up getting it. And when she called me back, I was like, I was actually working that day too. And so I stepped outside. I was like, it's that lady again, to my students. And it was during COVID, so I think I only had like 12 kids. So it was very, very small group of kids. And it was like, oh, that lady's calling from LA. And the kid didn't believe me at all. Like, yeah, right. And so I like come in and I was like, she's like, congratulations, you got the parts. And I was like, okay, can I know what movie it's for? She's like, yeah, it's Predator 5. It's a Disney movie. And I was like, what the? And yeah, and then I remember walking back in the classroom and I was like, I just got to roll in a Disney movie. And my kids were like, yeah, right, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously it was real, and that was really my introduction into the industry.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. The average number of crew credits in the top 1,000 films between 1994 and 2013 is 588. The average budget of a blockbuster Hollywood movie is around $100 million. The average cost of production for a major studio movie is around $65 million. Let us return to the conversation as Curtis shares his experience while on a movie film set.
The studios and the companies, they take care of everything. So they just essentially worked on my schedule. They had my hotel room. They had pickup from the airport. They had kind of everything. So it was more of just learning the lines and the song and kind of prepping that way, prepping for the performance. So yeah, it was obviously nerve-wracking, but really exciting as well too. So my first day I got there, I got to my trailer. And so they're just taking me through everything. So this is your trailer. This is where hair and makeup is. This blah, 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 costume. Like, oh, sweet. And so I go in my trailer. They put me through hair and makeup. They put me through wardrobe. So I have everything on, just sitting in my trailer. And they're like, oh, it's lunchtime. What do you want? And so they gave us our menu or whatever. So I ordered lunch. I'm eating chicken and rice. And then while I'm eating chicken and rice, I can hear the lady that I knew, the producer. And she was like, is my singer here? And I was like, well, I have chicken and rice in my hands. And so I quickly wiped my greasy hands off. And then she opened the door. She's like, hey, what's up? She's like, you look good, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, oh, meet the director. And then the director's right there too. And then, awesome voice, man. I was like, oh, thank you. And then right away, she's like, can you sing for us? And I was like, yep. But right away, and it just threw me off because I was wasn't ready for it, but it just taught me right away, just always be ready, always be ready. And then I ended up we got canceled that night, so that means we didn't have to leave our trailer. So the next night is when I went to set for the first time, but it was I met the whole cast that night, and so that was meeting people. They were all Indigenous, so it was really awesome. It was pretty easy to connect with everybody. And then and it's funny, my first day on set, I didn't even end up shooting any scenes that I was in. So I just sat in the tent with everybody, freezing our butts off till 2 a.m. And then the next night is when I started doing my scenes from Wednesday, I think, till 4 or 5 days of shooting. And it would range from 12-hour days to the longest, I think, was 18-hour day. Yeah, so it was pretty sweet. I knew what my role was in it, and it wasn't a huge role. But just the whole experience, obviously, being on a Disney set was something that was a dream come true. And even when it was my main scene to shoot, for me, it was I had nerves for a moment, but then it was having the confidence of you perform, you set for people on TV, you've done this, you've done that. Obviously, it's a little bit different to doing in front of big cameras and producers and directors and blah, blah, blah. But it's you've done this before. And I have confidence. And so when it was done, it was that was crazy. I was so high on adrenaline. I think I'm just holy man, this is wild. That when it was done, it was just kind of I wanted downtime. I'm just oh, that was crazy. But yeah, and then I guess once it's done, it is kind of weird because you don't really hear anything at all until the movie comes out. So yeah, that waiting process is weird of is people gonna like the movie? is my role even like part of good? And yeah, it's a whole different kind of mind games as finishes wraps to then being released.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The term is reference to the pre-digital days of... Welcome back to Open Connection. The term is a reference to the pre-digital days of film editing, when films were usually edited by physically cutting the actual reels of film that had been shot. Popular conception is that unused footage would literally be left on the editing or cutting room floor. In fact, offcuts of film were retained by special cutting room bin and numbered during the editing process, in case they were required later. Let us return to the conversation with Curtis.
I was in about 6 or 8 scenes that I filmed, but the way that they cut the film, and actually the one person too was that said they were Indigenous but wasn't. I was in a scene with them, and so they had to cut a bunch of that person's scenes. So a lot of my stuff was cut. The main stuff that I did was cut. So it was really weird because I never knew that either. Like, what the heck? What happened? But then after talking to the directors and producers, like, oh yeah, blah, 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 they gave me all of that stuff. But it was really cool just to be able to see that. I think the biggest thing for me, like even watching it on Disney Plus when I was finished and on the theater, is just seeing your name at the end credits. I think that was the coolest part of just like, well, you're there, you know what I mean? Or just like, wow, that's a cool experience. And then obviously just that foundational experience to push forward and to do other projects and continue in the industry. From that experience, I think I made like half my teacher salary within that week time. So I was like, well, goodbye, kids. That's my joke that I always send in. But it's like, for me, it was just like, that was so much fun. And I also learned how powerful, and I already knew this, but just how powerful representation and storytelling is. And for it to be an Indigenous story. And, I thought of, especially for the main character, played by Amber Midthunder, just how many Indigenous youth and females would look at her character and like to see inspiration, to see a hero that looks like, that are like her, that could be, deadly like her, and kill aliens and monsters like her, And so my whole favorite part of the movie is at the very end, where Amber, looks over and there's this little young girl from the village that looks at her and smiles, and they smile at each other. And I just see that reflected in so many youth of just like, that's how powerful that is. So for me, it's really getting back to wanting to help amplify those stories and create that space for Indigenous storytelling, for that inspiration, and for that representation.
How did you go about drumming up business for yourself?
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate. So I operate Wanska Media with my friend and business partner, River Thomas. And so we're in this beginning stages of Wanska Media, but I also do run, using my education background, I also founded and run a nonprofit called the Indigenous Futures Film Academy, which is essentially what we're going to be coming to do in Terrace. And that's providing communities with access to acting and writing workshops, and really providing young people the foundational skills to, be able to, maybe they're interested in storytelling and acting, and really maybe that doorway to open that path to show them, hey, this is possible. I never thought I was going to do this. But, if this is something you're passionate about, something you pray about, this is something that could happen for you too.
That workshop that you're going to be putting on here in Terrace, could you kind of give us a rough agenda of what the participants should be expecting when they attend?
So I believe we're at 2 of the local schools there. Forgive me, I don't have the names right off the top of my head, but I know we're going to be working with high school students and then the Promote youth group that I had the fortune to meet in Northern Saskatchewan this last summer. So my friend Alyssa Wapagatak, who is an amazing up-and-coming actress, writer, producer, director. She actually was Tiger Lily in Disney's Peter Pan. So she's going to be coming along, and she's going to be leading sessions on acting and introduction to acting. So essentially, she's just going to give her process of what, from what she's learned from acting school to when she does auditions and obviously it's in a pretty short frame time. I think we have 2 hours to 4 hours altogether. So it's going to be a sample size, but what we want to be able to do is leave the kids with something to let them start thinking about it anyway. And while she's doing acting, I'll be leading writing and the power of storytelling. And so what I'll be doing again too is just my writing process and kind of, the basic structure of writing, obviously decolonizing writing. So it's not just in a white way, but obviously in an Indigenous storytelling way. And really just trying to talk about character building, world building, Indigenous futurism, which is one of my favorite genres to write, and really giving the young people just a kind of a glimpse, again, of what we do, our processes, and we'll kind of get them going a little bit of what they could do to maybe add to their arsenal. So Indigenous futurism is a genre that is up and coming. I know Dennis Goulet did a film, Night Raiders. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but essentially it's rewriting history and having Indigenous people as the forefront or the heroes. So something like where, take for instance residential schools and, rewriting it to like where we're in a position of power and we're a position of over top of those things, have overcome those things. So for instance, like if you look at the movie also Black Panther, where it's revisioning Africa with Wakanda, where they're the most advanced technologically advanced civilization in the world. It's essentially those kind of things, but it's just Indigenous perspectives and Indigenous ones. So it's really just like flipping the whole colonial model upside on its head and, re-envisioning a future with us as the leaders in our versions of education. We really draw that, what we want that to look like. So it's kind of re-visioning history or, the future.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Born in 1954 to a Swedish father and Cree mother, he worked as a logger, trapper, and miner before going to Harvard Law School. In this final segment of Open Connection, Curtis shares how author Harold R. Johnson inspires him to tell new stories.
Like I'm writing two big films right now. It's a lot, but from a well-built perspective. But then there's also animation films that I want to do that, really look at language revitalization. I look to our brothers and sisters and our cousins down in Aotearoa in New Zealand, where they already have 6 or 7 Disney films that are redubbed in Te Reo Maori. So they have Disney movies like Lion King, Moana, Coco, all sorts of Disney movies, but it's all in their language. So, if I ask any 5 or 6 year olds, across Canada, it's Indigenous, and if they're to say, no, a Lion King song or a Moana song or a Frozen song, I bet you they know it and they know it in English. But imagine that now is in their Indigenous language. So I also see the power. And it goes back to where I want to recognize one of my mentors, who has fortunately passed on to the spirit world, but his name is Harold R. Johnson. He was the author, lawyer, trapper, many things. But he would say to me, like, the most powerful thing in the world is story, and the universe is story. And he would say, I am story, you are story, we are story. And say that, story has the power to kill you, and story has the power to heal you. And he would say, colonizers have been telling this dirty, drunken Indian story about my people since they got here. And we've heard it so much that we started to believe it. And he would say, it's time for us to start to reclaim our stories. And the only way we're going to do that is through artists. And so for me, I kind of channel that within my work of telling new stories that bring life to our people, that bring power to our people, that bring respect to our people, that bring healing, laughter, all those types of emotions and feelings that, as the original storytellers of this land too, things have definitely moved to a more online friendly platform across pretty much all industries. Within the film and TV industry, like all my auditions for acting are all online. I don't have to be a place. If you do make it to the final round, they will fly you in, and then you do have to do an in-person audition. But mostly every single one that I do is online. All my business meetings, all online. So it really helps that access opportunity, and what we want to do too with the communities that we visit with Indigenous Futures Film Academy is, right, so we look at it's not feasible or nor affordable to be like, okay, we're going to hire you guys and you're going to come every single month to do the work. Like, so, but what we can do is, okay, we'll come visit you or come to your community, visit with your community, build a relationship with your community, and maybe that's once a year, maybe that's twice a year, whatever that budget and capacity will allow for, and schedule will allow for. But we have online now too. We're like, hey, let's do a follow-up for the ones that are really interested, and let's do, maybe once a month, or let's do, whatever that is. So we're really open to really using that online opportunity to build bridges, but then also still make sure that we're investing in youth and really building the skills of those that are interested.
What do you see happening in the next 5 years when it comes to Indigenous peoples and also streaming online?
Yeah, the industry I believe the Indigenous TV and film industry, I believe, is the fastest growing niche in the industry, just because the success of Reservation Dogs, the success of Prey, it's just people we're starting to get representation. There's still such a low representation across the spectrum still. Within the industry, we represent 2% of all the roles. Within the UCLA did a study in Hollywood, and we had, I think, 1 out of 1,800 of the feature films released had a lead character that's Native American. So just in that sense, I know even with the Writers Guild of Canada, their percentage is under 1% of Indigenous writers. So it's enough. And if you people talk about reconciliation, a big part of that's action and making space, making room, and a part of that is training and access, and that's kind of what a part of our mission at IFFA is providing that access and training, but then also networking and providing on-screen, on-set opportunities for Indigenous people to really gain those skills as well.
And Curtis, is there anything I might have missed that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's about it. I just really looking forward to coming to visit the community. I've never been up that way, so I'm really looking forward to it, and really looking forward to connect with youth elders and getting to hear the stories from there. I have my stories back home, the stories that I've been really blessed to hear from my elders, and I always really appreciate loving hearing the stories of the locals where I go visit, wherever I am. But I don't want to hear the stories of the people that call themselves locals in Ottawa here, the politicians. I don't want to interested in their stories.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.